Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Fadi Hamdan. I'm the Chief Technical Advisor for the UNDP-sponsored project on National Urban Risk Reduction Center in Syria. And I want to speak today about the main components of an earthquake school safety program which we are carrying out and developing in the Syrian Arab Republic. Why are we doing such a program? Because obviously schools hold some of the most vulnerable sectors of the population, meaning children and youth, because in schools there is the future of any country, because the UN Millennium Development Goal number 2 speaks about achieving universal primary education by 2015, and obviously we cannot concentrate more people in schools and having schools unsafe, because also the HIOGO 4th priority vulnerability reduction the task 15 speaks about strengthening mechanisms for improved building safety and protection of critical facilities, including schools. Again, this is important because when we look at observed damage during recent earthquakes, we find out that sometimes schools are among the most heavily damaged. And finally, because there are many challenges in strengthening, retrofitting and the rehabilitation of schools, and all these can only be addressed, in our opinion, by a comprehensive school safety, earthquake safety program. When we were doing, as the NURC Center, many tasks in improving earthquake safety of schools, but when we wanted to improve ourselves, we decided to follow what we call an evidence-based approach, which means that we wanted to look at some of the most recent earthquakes and look in particular at the damage to the education sector and see which countries fared better than other countries and why. And so if we look here, I can give the details later. I've put 6 earthquakes. The first 2 are in New Zealand, where we see that there have been school damages but no fatalities. The third one is in Chile. 2.1 of the 30 billion damages were in the school sector. No one died because it happened during the school vacation. And the important thing in New Zealand, it did not happen. The first one happened during school time and no one died. In Haiti, 80% of the schools were completely destroyed, and this led to the death of 4,000 students and 700 teachers inside the schools, other than those that died outside. The Haiti one happened during school time. The 5th one in Italy, it happened in the early hours of the morning at 3:23 a.m. So even in Italy, which is a European developed country, something in the Abruzzo region, 50% of the schools were destroyed. There were no fatalities because it was in the early morning, but some university students lying in the dormitories died, around 11 died, and this actually had an impact on the number of people going to that university. And finally in India, a bit earlier in 2001, 66% of the schools were destroyed in the Gujarat earthquake. 971 students and 30 teachers died. When we looked in a bit more detail about the different aspects, what these countries were doing about their earthquake school safety programs, we found that the New Zealand program was quite a bit distinct from all the rest, because they had what we call a comprehensive school safety program. So maybe India, Italy and so on, there were some components working on making some schools safe, on making some schools having earthquake response plans, but New Zealand had a targeted time-scale program to implement school safety and complete it within a certain date, which is why the 7.1 earthquake, which is the one number 2, the 7.1 damaged only one school, and these were damaged, not destroyed. And the one that came after damaged 163 schools, but none of the students died. Indeed, this conclusion is reiterated in one of the most important documents recently published by the OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which was done in conjunction with Geohazards, which is a California-based international NGO. And they concluded that school buildings do not collapse due to a lack of scientific understanding. We all know why buildings collapse. But rather they do collapse in part due to failure of governments to define and implement effective school earthquake safety programs. And when we wanted to look more, investigate what is meant by earthquake school safety programs and what does it entail in terms of cost and in terms of duration, so that we should not underestimate neither the cost nor the duration that it takes to do such a program. And we wanted to look at some of the developing countries to understand the tasks ahead. And we chose 6 European countries. This is again published in one of the OECD publications. And these countries are Austria, France, Greece, Italy, Portugal, and Spain. The first row shows the overall cost that they estimated for improving their schools. The second row shows the education budget per year. The third row shows the percentage if all the work should be done per year. And the fourth row shows the percentage if it's going to be done over a 20-year period. The first thing we can conclude is that this is unmanageable to do, even for European countries, in 1 year, but it becomes very manageable if we divide it over a period of years. The second thing we can conclude is that if it is designed as part of a program where schools are regularly maintained and retrofitted, then it becomes easier to manage, especially if we take into account that some schools become old and are phased out, and others are built anew. So if this is incorporated within that, it becomes much easier to manage. Again, by international standards, there are 5 main pillars for an earthquake school safety program. These are to develop and enforce modern building codes. The second pillar is to encourage community awareness and participation. Perhaps this is more on the response side. The third is to specify levels of seismic resistance in schools. The fourth is to train professionals, builders and technicians. And the fifth is to ensure independent oversight and long-term policy commitment by governments. So in the remaining time that I have, I want to try to summarize as much as time allows the progress in each one of these and the challenges and the proposed solutions in each one of these as well. So regarding modern building codes, currently there is a building code that's being reviewed in Syria. It's the salient features that need reviewed, like ductility and vertical earthquake excitation and the magnitude of the horizontal PGA have been identified, and soil amplification. The mandates of the various public institutions are also being reviewed to identify who should do what. And finally, forms are being filled in order to assess to what degree the code is being properly enforced. And as we know, in all countries, in all third world countries, there are issues of enforcement of the code. It's not only about developing a code, but it's about enforcing it. The second pillar, community awareness and participation. Here we're doing training programs to secondary school students, primary school students, and to teachers. This has started in 4 governorates. It's currently being assessed before it's revised and implemented throughout the 14 governorates. Another thing we're doing is that we've incorporated DRR into 5 class levels. 3 have been completed and 2 are currently being developed. The third pillar is to set a standard, set a particular value which schools should be able, a particular value for acceleration for earthquakes, which schools should be able to resist. The engineering syndicate has done that. It's currently being reviewed by the engineering syndicate from the engineering side and by the earthquake center from the geophysics side. We're also looking at the idea of tolerable levels of risks for earthquakes as it is viewed in the education sector, and comparing it to what exists in other important critical infrastructure sectors. Regarding the training of professionals, we've reviewed training courses in the region and worldwide, and we have reviewed the mandates because we need to understand who should be trained and on what. We're designing training courses for various people like technicians, engineers, urban designers, local decision makers, and the training has started in 2 governorates and it's about to be expanded to the rest. Long-term policy commitment, the disaster risk reduction implications are now incorporated in the 11th 5-year plan. The strategies, policies and institutions responsible for DRR are being consolidated. There is a proposal to incorporate disaster risk reduction into the planning for development process. And also Syria is the Arab regional champion for resilient cities, where the 5th point is to assess the safety of all schools and health facilities and upgrade these as necessary. Now, regarding the challenges and the solutions, when it comes to building codes, there is a perception, maybe in many third world countries, that there are other priorities for development other than making schools safe against earthquakes, and we're addressing this challenge by incorporating disaster risk reduction into the planning for development by the RPC. The RPC stands for Regional Planning Commission, which regional means more, one or more governorate. The second challenge in this area is to the enforcement of the code, and here we're reviewing the mandates. This is especially a challenge not for the schools that have been built after 2003, but for the older schools, who's responsible for assessing their safety, and we're reviewing there the mandate in order to make sure that this is clear. Regarding community awareness, we've done a lot of community awareness programs, but there is a challenge. We didn't have enough experience in engendering these programs. We work with an international gender consultant from the University of London to help us engender the programs. We're also, in order to improve skills needed to develop the earthquake response plans in schools, we're training teachers to do that. Regarding the level of seismic resistance, on the one hand, there is very few recent earthquakes that have been damaging, very severe in Syria. On the other hand, when they happen, they are very severe. It's a further challenge because if you are listening today, the global assessment report, we cannot rely on this inventar because there hasn't been any earthquake loss damage in recent years. So this is a challenge we're addressing by showing decision makers that from a tectonic and seismological study, how many times Syria have been affected by earthquakes. Another challenge is setting a high level of seismic hazard may be challenging in view of resources, building materials and workmanship. We're addressing that by raising awareness to decision makers, by working with the engineering syndicate to train on building ductile design, and by providing courses for technicians. Regarding training of professionals, we're doing a regional masters in disaster risk management, which will have both an option for prevention and an option for response, and another training institute in Adra, which is going to be responsible for the response agencies. There is a large number of professionals which need to be trained, which is why we have identified partners to work with us in the training of trainers so they can then continue the training process themselves. Finally, regarding long-term policy commitment, one challenge is the lack, we need more linkages between the various public and private institutions, as well as we need better data sharing mechanisms. We're trying to address that by consolidating all the disaster risk reduction agencies into one agency, which should hopefully eventually be under the executive authority. And another thing that we need is a disaster management program, and this disaster management program with an earthquake safety in school program is going to be one of the main pillars of the disaster management program. So basically what I'm trying to say in the end, from our review of the various observed earthquake damage, and from our review of what the countries have done that have suffered the least damage, we can conclude that it's not enough to do to work on these 5 different pillars separately, but they must be joined all under one earthquake safety program, which is what we are doing. Thank you very much.